Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you so that you'll see basically what's going on in the Golf Genius program itself. So here we go. Good. So you should be seeing the dashboard for a particular event that I've set up. And we're going to cover a lot of things today, and I'm going to go fairly quickly. I'm not going to be necessarily trying to teach you how to do this as much as I want to show you what Scorecard Composer can do so that you're invigorated and excited about trying it out on your own in the future to get an idea of all the things you can do with Scorecard Composer. I would guess that most of you have used the legacy scorecards from time to time, but the Scorecard Composer gives us a lot more flexibility and a lot more options to be able to create cards that are very professional looking and put on the cards the kinds of information and the data that you want to see on the card. So let's review first what I've set up here. I've got a very simple event called Scorecard Composer. If I go to golfers, you'll see that I have 48 people in the field, and I've broken those 48 people into you'll see in a second here, 2 flights. So I've got 2 flights of folks, 48 golfers in total. This is going to take place on Friday, October 15th, theoretically. And I've already created pairings. So if we go look at the pairings, you will see that we've got our 12 groups out here, 48 players in foursomes, all assigned to various courses and tees on Forest Creek, and a shotgun of sorts. I've created 2 tournaments we're going to try to play today. The tournaments are set up as best ball net pair versus their flight, and an individual net player versus the flight as well. So we're going to be looking at individual net against the flight and best ball of a pair of players against every other pair in the flight. So that's the game for today. So if we've set up our pairings and we've got everybody on tee boxes and we've defined our games, the next step is always to go to scorecards at that point. So let's go back to rounds up top, and we'll go down to print scorecards right down here where we always go, and it'll bring up our scorecard entry page. Now, when you get here, everything on the right here that I'm circling has to do with um, accessing legacy scorecards. These are the scorecards that were originally put out with Golf Genius about 4 years ago when we first got the program here in the Carolinas. Legacy scorecards are very adequate, but they do have, as I said before, some restrictions on what you can and can't do. You don't have a lot of capability to manipulate the grid. You can only add certain fields in certain areas, and you can only put type in certain areas. Of course, Scorecard Composer is on the left side here. And what you can do is be able to not only compose scorecards, but put them in your library and keep track of them to use them over and over again. So let's look at what we're looking at here. If you look down below, if I scroll down, you'll see 2 lines of information here. One is called My Scorecards. These are our library. It's in your, say, it would be your library of cards that you've used. There might be nothing in there. There might be some starter cards in there. The second category down below is what's called other scorecards published by the community. These are a variety. I'm going to just scroll across to show you how many scorecards are in there. There's a whole bunch that have already been previously created and highlighted and put out there by other associations or people in the system, in the Golf Genius system, and you can steal these cards to use them as a starting point for your cards. So all you have to do is kind of look at the design a little bit, look at the name. If you wish to steal one of these cards, so we're going to do best ball today. So if we were doing a best ball, I would go across to, there's a scramble card there. There's a couple scramble cards. There's a championship 4-ball card. There's a 666 starting card. Club championship single player card, lots and lots of different cards. All you would have to do if we wanted to pick up a 4-ball card, if I can find one real quick, there we go, doubles team Stableford best ball, is you would go to the category, put your mouse over the top, go to the categories and put it into any one of your categories. Most of the time you would put it in scorecards. And when I do that, you can see that that one, doubles team Stableford best ball, just showed up in now my library. And now when I put my mouse over the top of that card, I have the ability to print it, or edit it or copy it or change categories. So if I wanted to just print it, I could print it from down below, just hit print. Or if I wanted to edit it to put my logo in or some piece of information that was important to me, I move it to my library and then I have the ability to edit it. I can also change the name, to call it, my card. Let's get rid of all that. My card, for today, whatever I want to call that, and it becomes part of my library forever and ever and ever under the Scorecard Composer. Okay, so take advantage of looking through the publishing cards down below to get yourself a starting point if you need to, or you can go back to one of your existing scorecards that you've built in the past. But what I want to show you today is how do you start from scratch? Let's just say I want to build a card on my own from scratch. And the way we're going to do that is to hit this button right up here that says New Scorecard. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that for this event that we're working today. So a new scorecard comes up. First thing it's going to do is ask you what you want to name this scorecard. So today, let's just call this a demo card for October 6th. Okay, so that's what we're going to name it for today's thing. And where do I want to put that? I want to go ahead and put that in my scorecards. Oops, there we go. Click on scorecards. And that's the only two questions really asked you. Give it a name and where do you want to store it? So I'm going to store it in scorecards so it's to be part of my library. And then all of a sudden I hit save in the bottom right. And now I'm going to be brought to the scorecard composer section. And it's going to look very familiar to you to legacy cards. And the very first thing that we always have to concern ourselves with on every scorecard is what game do I want this card to be based on? Okay, so it's asking you right here to select a tournament. We have a user-defined tournament where you can define what you want here. I highly suggest you do not use that. I've already made the tournaments. I already have the handicap information that I want. So let's have the cards be based on the tournaments I've already created. Yeah, time and time again, when people use user-defined, somewhere along the line, they're going to miss a setting, they're going to miss something checkbox somewhere, and their cards are going to come out wrong. It's a lot easier to use the cards in accordance with the tournament you've already set up. So I have two choices. I have best ball, net, pair versus the flight, or individual net. So which game do I want to have these cards based on? Well, best ball is where I want to put this particular set of cards because I'd like to know where the dots are on the card because it is best ball. Individual net, it really doesn't matter where the dots are on the card, that somebody's going to get a handicap index and we're just going to subtract their handicap from their total 18-hole score. And the fact of the matter is best ball in our tournament today has been set at 85% handicap, where individual net has been set at 90%. So I want my cards to reflect best ball. That's what my teams are going to want to see. That's what's going to be important today. So I'm going to choose best ball net to be the game I'm going to base my cards on. And that's what's going to have the handicap information and the dots according to that game. The other thing I want to do on this first tab is just make sure that all my teams are selected. So that I get a scorecard for everybody. You can unselect everybody and say, I just want a card for Jim Young and Bill Zell's group, or I can select all and make sure I've got everybody here. So next up, we're going to go to format. Under format, this is the very first step in the scorecard composition. I have to define what my scorecard is generally going to look like. So you see the grid here, and by default, it's going to show me all 4 players. Now today, I'm going to be a US letter landscape card. That's the typical card shape that goes with our scorecard paper. I'm going to have an 18-hole card, but I do have the ability to restrict it to a front 9 card, a back 9, or a 9-hole card in general. Today, we're playing an 18-hole match, so I'm going to leave it at 18 holes. I can print scorecards per page. I can do 1 scorecard per page. If I click on that, you can see that I get a lot more territory to design and put stuff. So you could actually have 1 scorecard for an entire 8.5, 11 sheet of paper. Okay. If I do 2 scorecards per page, then you can see it cuts down on the real estate that I have. Basically, it's going to let me put data in half of a 8.5 by 11 page. And it also allows me to print 3. And if I print 3 scorecards, you can see it restricts me even more as to the space I have to put things in. And if I move my grid up, here. You can see the grid pretty much takes up everything. I don't have a lot of room to put anything else. So we're going to do 2 scorecards per page and let it ride that way because that's our normal setup to be able to maximize our paper. Next category is, do I want to show players or teams? I get the ability to show every player, or I get to show both the players in pairs. It already knows that my tournament is pair versus the field, or I'm sorry, in this case, pair versus the flight. So it's offering me the opportunity to show the pairs. So if I click on show both players in pairs, you will see a big difference comes up. Immediately, it's going to show me, in this case, over to the right, 1 pair per scorecard. So I have a pair of players in a team line, and it also throws on marker notes. We can add or subtract those as we want. I can also say I want to see all pairs on the scorecard. So if I click here, now what you're going to see is a grid that shows me Tim and John in their team line and Richard and Joe in their team line. So that very well might be the way you want it to be. I can move this grid around and make sure it fits, and that's where we can go. In my case, I want to have 1 scorecard per pair of players so they can exchange cards, or at least I want to put more information on the card. So I'm going to go back to 1 pair per scorecard, and in this particular case, I do not necessarily, I just want to show every player, and I want to show 2 players per scorecard. So you can see you can mix and match however you want things to come out. I just want to see Tim and John on the card. You'll see why in a minute. And that's all. I want to see 2 players per card. So I will get 2 cards per foursome, obviously. If there's 4 people in a foursome, I'm going to get 2 cards per foursome, 2 players on each card. So this format is important. You need to establish this first in order to get the cards the way that you want them to be formatted. Next up is the tab called Handicap Stroking. Here I get to determine whether I want to print handicap strokes or dots on the card. You can see down below I've got my dots turned on. I've got my course handicap turned on, as well as my playing handicap. Because we're playing at 85%, Tim is a 2, and after 85%, he's still a 2, so he just gets 1 number here. I'm going to see if I can make that a little bigger, because that's as big as we're going to go here. There we go. And John is a 10, and after 85% of his particular course handicap unrounded, he becomes an 8 for playing handicap. Alrighty, so that's how I can turn these on and off. If I turn off the playing handicap, I get their course handicaps only. If I turn that off, I get dots only. If I turn that off, I get nothing on the card. So you can have any combination of this information that you want. Many times it's just to avoid confusion. A lot of times people will turn off the course handicap so they just see the playing handicap. The playing handicap will represent the number of dots you see on the card. So I've got 2 with 2 dots. I have an 8 with 8 dots, and it doesn't get confusing when John is shown with a 10/8. But you can control and turn on and off whichever you want here. The next tab is additional info and teas, and this is where we start to determine what we want to have show up on this card even more. We're still controlling the grids, the scoring areas. In this case, I want to use a lot of this space, so I'm not going to have the marker notes, but I do, before I turn them off, because I can turn them off with this red X over here, I do want to show you that I can include, nowadays, kind of cool, if I was going to leave the marker notes on there, I can show the player data in the marker notes. So it would automatically turn on their opponent's name and all the dots and information for the opponents up top, so that those opponents don't necessarily have to hand write that in before they start and exchange cards. That's a new feature in the Score Composer that's been really kind of cool. Makes it very easy for everybody to exchange cards and know that I'm going to have Tim's and John's card here, but my information is up top already on there. Today, though, I don't really want the marker notes, so I can turn them off with the red X over here. Or if I want to turn them back on, you can see over here to the left, right there, is the opportunity to turn them back on. So I can turn them on or off at my discretion. Today, I want them to be turned off. Now, I also have the ability to add extra rows to my card. So I'm going to want to add a couple of custom rows to this card for myself. And so I have those links over here to the left. If I want to add a scorecard row, I can do that by clicking right here on the top button. And what you'll see is an extra row shows up down below. I can also take that away with the red X. I can also add what's called an out and in row. That's automatically set up. If I do that, my out and in row, whoops, got carried away there. My out and in row is set up as an out button. I got to do that again. Here we go. There we go. As an out button where you can have a total set aside, and it's much easier to spot that total on the card rather than looking for the column of out and in. I can also put in what's called an in, out, and total row. So that'll be 3 boxes, an out box, an in box, and a total box. So you can use this to your advantage as well to make it easier to spot the scores really quickly if all you're worried about is what the totals are. Again, I can add and subtract those anytime I want using these buttons on the left. I'm going to add a scorecard row. Because we're playing best ball gross and best ball net, I'm going to come in here and add some text here called best ball, if I can spell, gross. Okay. And then I want to put another scorecard row of my own where I can then label it best ball net. So there's no confusion whatsoever as to what we want the players to write into these rows. I get to decide what I want to call it. If I had left the team rows there from before that the computer put in and format, it would just say team score. I want to make a distinction between gross and net, so I add my own extra rows and label them the way that I want them to be labeled. All right. I also have the ability to put slashes everywhere. I'm not a big fan of those, but you can certainly do that. I want to highlight the starting row. Yes, I've got a shotgun going. I'd like to highlight that. And I'm going to highlight that whether with yellow this time, I'm just going to highlight that with green so that they know where they're starting. I also have the ability here in the middle to put the pace of play row on the card if I wanted to. So I can go ahead and do that. And it just adds another row at the bottom of the card that has pace of play information that I've already established in my course set up so that everybody will know when they're supposed to finish by finishing the hole. So if everybody's starting here at 9:30, this hole number 1, which is a par 4, should be done at 9:45 according to whoever set up the pace of play. The other thing that we have here established is a column for their initials that's already turned on. So I can go ahead and put the player's initials into the field as well. So if the card is folded over, they still know which row corresponds to what player. And then again, we talked about it earlier, I could still put marker notes here, but I want to use this real estate up top for some other things that I'll show you in a second. That's why I have the marker notes turned off. Over on the right, I am going to select this option here that's already in dark blue that you can see, print tees played by the golfers in the group. Now it's offered me 2 sets of tees, the Creek men's tee here and the Creek women's tee. What it's telling me is that I have both men and women in this event. So I might have men only on the card. I might have women only on the card. It'll depend on the foursome, or I might very well have men and women in the same group. So it's going to need to print both of these. So therefore, I know I have at least 1 or 2 groups that have both men and women in the same pairing group. So I have to design this card as if both of these tee fields are going to be turned on. If I don't do that, if I just do it according to men or just according to women, then at times this card's going to get bigger or smaller depending on what the makeup of that pairing group is. So I want to design for the maximum size, and in this particular case, that maximum size would be showing me both the Creek men and the Creek women on the same card. That's a lot of real estate, but I got to take that into account because you'll see later when we look at it, some of these pairing groups are going to need that. So I'm going to leave both there and use it. I could turn that off, and then I can just decide I only want to print men, so I could design the card forcing only the men's tee to show up, or I could force it to only show the women's tee for every single card, but that isn't always practical. So in this case, I'm going to turn on that I'm going to print the tees on the card based on the makeup of the pairing group. You may, in some cases, if you're using 4 or 5 tee boxes, you may not have enough room on the card to always print 4 or 5 tee boxes if somebody is using 4 boxes. So you may want to limit it and just turn on a couple of boxes for every card. And who's ever not on that tee may very well have to have a spare card in their pocket if they want to keep track of the yardage and everything else. It really depends on you. And of course, everything's dependent on how much real estate you have on your page to print stuff. Okay, so that takes care of additional info and tees. I can add extra scorecard rows. I can add or subtract marker notes. I can turn on starting holes. I can add pace of play. I have initials and columns for initials, and I can decide which tee boxes I want to have show up on the card. That's all within the grid. We're just really controlling the grid right now, not the space outside the grid. I'm going to jump from additional info and tees over to header and footer, because at this point, we're going to start to add things outside of the grid. So I'm going to click to header and footer. When I click the header and footer, you can see I've got all kinds of tools here now. I can add a text or a data field. I can put a primary logo, a secondary logo. I can bring in a photo from an album that's already in Golf Genius. I can upload a photo from my computer into the card. I can add a rectangle. I can add lines. I can stack things front to back or front back to front so that things are showing in front or back of things. I can duplicate items, which is really kind of convenient at times. You'll see me do that in a second, or I can delete those things. So let's first start. What else would I want on this card? Well, one of the first things I'd like to see, of course, is the title of the event. So I'm going to come over here to add the text or data field. And when I click on that, I'm going to get a whole bunch of new data. Okay, over to the left here, I have my design or styling window. And on the right, I get to pick any one of the data tokens that you see here. You can see there's tons of data that I can pick up out of this event and put on this card. Okay, I can put information having to do with player one, all of their names and affiliations and stuff. If that information is in player one's record, I get to put it on the card. If I can scroll down, now I have player two's data that I can choose from, all kinds of data. And eventually at the bottom, I get to event related data. So you see that right here. And the one thing I want to do is I want to use event name. So once I click on this event name, you can see that that data token is now in my styling window over here to the left. Now I get to style it. What do I want it to look like? So I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to change the font here to be my Alamendra font. I would like it to be bold. I'd like it to be much bigger. Let's make it almost 20, let's do 28. And I would like it to be centered in the space that I put it in. So I have all these tools here that you can see. I can make numbered lists. I can make things right adjusted, left adjusted. I can put roles. This is all HTML type of information. But the simple thing is I just changed the font, the size, the boldness, and let's give it a color. So I'm going to go ahead and text the color, more color. Let's make it a nice rich blue. All right, so now that it's blue and ready to go, I can go ahead and apply the text change. And when I do that, I go back to my card and now I get to place this anywhere I want on the card. And it's up in the upper left. And if I just click anywhere, I usually click right on the token, I can drag this anywhere on the card I want. So I've got total freedom to put text where I want to. That's one of the beauties of Scorecard Composer. So I'm going to kind of put this guy right here, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it so it's centered between this whole section from left to right. And now I want to see if that fits, so I can scroll down and I have a button on the bottom bar that will refresh my preview. So let's take a look at the preview and make sure that that fits in that space. It might be too big, might be too small. I may have chosen too large of a type font or too large a typeface. So we wait just a second. It should refresh in just a minute here. Of course, it'll also pick up all the other changes I made as well. Wow, that's taken a while today. There we go. So there's my title, Scorecard Composer Demonstration. It looks like it fits on the left-hand side of the card. That's exactly what I want it to look like. So that's perfect. Now, what other kind of information would I want on here? Well, clearly I might want the date of the round. So let's go back to the text or data field. I'm going to go down to my round related data. And what I would like to pick up is the round date. So here's the round date. When I hover there, it shows you that it's going to look like Tuesday, August 28th. Well, in this case, it should be October 15th, I believe, or whatever date I chose. So we're going to put the round date in here. I want that not to be quite so big, so let's make that a little bit smaller. Make that 20. We can still have it bold so it shows up, and we want to have it left adjusted, so that's fine. So now we apply that text change. Here's my data token number 2, round date. I can again drag it anywhere I want. And what I'd like to be able to do is maybe put that so it's right here, just left aligned with the rest of the grid. So that looks pretty good. What other information? Well, if I want the date it's played, I probably want the tee time as well. Let's go back and pick up a tee time. So if I'm going to add the text or data again, this time the tee time varies for every player. So we're going to go back up to the top and we're going to pick up player related data. And what I'm going to be looking for in these fields is a player's tee time. So there's P1 tee time. So I want to put player 1's tee time on here. I could put player 2. Player 1 and player 2 are playing together, so they're both going to have the same tee time. But I'm going to pick up player 1's tee time, and this is just going to show up on the card as 9:30 a.m. Well, if I just drop that somewhere, that's kind of useless. So I'm going to actually put here the words tee time. So I can actually type text in here as well. And I'm going to put tee time, and then I'm going to make this a 2-line deal by putting a return, and I'm going to make it centered. And that's probably a decent size, and we'll just bold it just for fun and apply the text. Now, when I get here, you can see that this, I'm going to pull it over here where you can see it. I actually have my text followed by the actual field. Okay, so that I'm actually putting some text in there followed by the field. So I'm going to drop that in right around here, just so you'll see why. And that looks a little big for me. So I'm going to double click it. I can go back here, highlight everything, and let's take and move this down to something a little smaller. Let's just move it to 18. And maybe we take off the bold. So you can go back and forth all you want. And so now it's not quite so huge, and we can drop it right about there. Now, we did say that this event was based on flights, so it might be important for the players to know what flight they're playing in. So let's go get some flight information as well. So I can, again, add text or field. The flight is dependent on the player. So once again, I've got to find the player's flight within the player information. And what you can see right here, I happen to know where it is, but you'd have to look through here. Here is P1 flight name. So that's player 1's flight name. So that's the data token I want to choose. Again, that's just going to put the word Nicholas or put the word Trevino out there. So in order for me to make it a little more friendly, I'm going to type the word flight in front of it. So it says flight Nicholas, flight Trevino. All right, I still like that text is just fine the way it is. And so I'm going to apply the text change. Now my data taken field is right here. Again, I can put it where I want. I'm going to tuck it right in here and make it agree with the right-hand side of the field. And I'm going to make it about the same level as the date on the left. So let's take a look at what we've done so far and refresh the preview. So that's what we've got here. You can see a couple of mistakes here. We have not made our field long enough to accept Friday, October 15th without doubling the line. So we'll fix that. And my flight on Nicholas is floating in the middle of nowhere here. So we want to make that right adjusted so it lines up nice with the right end of the grid. So let's go back and fix a couple of things and then we'll move on. First off, as far as the Friday, October 15th, all I have to do is click on this field. And I just simply can grab this little tiny box up here and just make the field longer, okay? That will now allow Friday, October 15th to fit on one line. As far as the flight information, I have to go in and edit that. So I'm going to double click the flight information. It'll bring me back to the styling window, and I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to make it right adjusted so that it sits to the right. And I'm going to apply that text change. So now My flight information is going to be always right adjusted to the grid, and I can use my arrow keys to sort of line that up specifically with the right side of the grid right here. And now let's go take a look at the preview and see if we fixed our mistakes. So that looks a little bit better. All I want to do now is Friday, October 15th is a little high and flight is a little low. All we're going to do is go up here again, click on Friday, the October 15th, and use my arrow keys to move that down so it's more in line with the flight information, and we refresh one more time. So you can be as fussy as you want. I tend to like to have things organized and lined up and right adjusted and things like that to make the card look good. So here we are on this particular case with that card looking okay. What else would we want to put on here? Well, let's go put a logo in here. So if I'm going to go get a photo from an album, I have probably already selected a primary and a secondary logo, but I want to go get a logo from in my logo library. So let's go look for a logo from the album. It's going to show me all my albums out here. And one of my albums, photo albums, is logos. So if I click on the logo album, here at the USGA, we have just tons and tons of logos that we've loaded into Golf Genius over the years to be able to use, because we go to a lot of different places to put out our different tournaments that we do. So let's see, let's pick up, what should we pick up here today? I want one that's a little horizontal. Let's take Mid Pines here. And so we're going to select Mid Pines. It's going to come and put it right on my card, and then I can go and move it anywhere I want. But I also have the ability with these buttons in the corners to resize it. So it's a little big for what I need today. So we're going to resize it down a little bit, and we'll drop it right here in the corner. So it'll look a little bit like that. And we can move this tee time thing a little closer, I suspect. And let's take it our preview now that our logo is there. Perfect. Looks really nice with the logo in the corner, tee times next to it. Got some good information going on. The next thing is you also have the ability not to just pick up generic stuff, but as I said earlier, we can pick up very unique information for our players. So let's go get something a little more complex. Just to show you what goes on. Here's my text field again. We're going to go out and get some data tokens and some text. The first thing I want is I want player one's name. So the player who's on this card, I'd like to pick up their handle, which is first name and last name added together. And then I'm going to add a dash to my field. I'm going to write out the name GIN number, colon, and then I'm going to add in his GIN number. So I got P1 GIN here. So I can add that for P1 GIN. So let's make this, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so it fits. Make it 16. And now let's put that on the page by applying the text change. When I do that, I get a data field here that's set up as player name, GIN number, and the actual GIN number. So let's let that put right there, and we'll size that. And let's take a look at what that looks like. When I do that, you can see that I have Tim's GIN number, and again, I don't have quite enough room on the line to print it out. So I'm gonna just expand this a little bit, see if that works. And we're getting a little crowded here. So what I'm going to do is also move over the tee time a little bit by using my arrows. And one more time, see what this looks like. There we go. Looking much better down below here. So if you have to put any kind of data on the card, this could be Tim Zimmerman in his home course. This could be Tim Zimmerman in his hometown. This could be Tim Zimmerman and a charge account at your club if you had it in his data field. It could be Tim Zimmerman and his phone number. It could be whatever data you want to put on this card that is in Tim Zimmerman's record. We happen to know that in Tim Zimmer's player record is his GIN number, so I pulled that out. But we also want to put his partner here. So what can we do? Well, I can go back and do this all again, but you can see I spent some time making sure that this was styled just so. This is one little trick that you need to keep track of. I can go up here and highlight this box, okay? And with one of my tools, I can duplicate it. So if I duplicate it, I get an entire duplication of it, and I can bring that over here and tuck it right under here so that I can have second spot. I'm going to move it up a little bit like that. And if I preview it now, you'll see that because I duplicated it, I'll get 2 Tin Zimmermans. But the good news is that this data field is perfectly styled. I don't have to style it again. So now all I can do is, for a shortcut, I can go back in here. I can edit this field down below. I can click on it and then double click on it. It brings me back to the styling window. And one of the things you'll notice is I can very quickly change this without having to go through all the effort. I can change player 1 to player 2 and player 1 to player 2. I don't have to restyle it. I don't have to check it. I already like the way it was. I'm just changing it from player 1's data to player 2's data. I apply the text change. Now I have player 1 name, player 1 ID, player 2 name, player 2 ID, and when we preview it, now John Zatorsky's information will be there as well. So you can make use of the duplicate. If you've spent a lot of time styling something just the way you want it, so it'll fit, don't worry about having to style the next one exactly the same. Just duplicate it and then change the P1 to P2 or P3 or P4, depending on what you're doing. All right, so we've pretty much filled up the top side of this card. There's a few things that I might want to add to the bottom of the card as well. In this particular case, perhaps I would like to have a signature lines. Okay, so let's add those. In this particular case, we're going to go over here and add a text field. But rather than add a data token, I'm just going to type in text. I'm going to put in competitor. Whoops, competitor, like that, with a colon. And let's make this, probably doesn't need to be 16. Let's make it 14. And it will be left aligned, and we'll bold it just so it stands out and apply the text change. Now I have the word competitor that I can once again put anywhere on the page I want. I'm going to put it right down here near the bottom, left aligned. And because I'm going to want a score line as well, let's go ahead and have that highlighted. And when it's highlighted, I can duplicate it. It shows up right here as a duplicate of competitor. I'm going to bring it over here and add it to this side. But now I'm going to double click it. It's already styled. All I have to do here is just change the text. It's got the same style, same font, everything else. And now I apply the text change. And now the card says score instead of competitor. So I'm saving myself time and effort and agony. I also need a line for them to write it on. So let's go add a line. This is a little trickier, but it's pretty simple. Add a line. This little thing shows up in the upper left-hand corner here, if you can see that. It's got a little cross on it. That cross allows you to pick it up and drag it anywhere you want. So I'm going to drag it right down here. Okay. And there's a little box to the right that allows me to make it bigger or smaller, so I can just draw it out. It starts out as a horizontal line, but you have some line styling information up here top. The line right now is considered to be solid, but I could make it dotted. I could make it dashed. I could even put a double line. Those are the options that I have. I'm going to go ahead and make it just a solid line. I can make this line 1 point thick, or I can make it a really thick line, which would be not what we really want, but you can go from 1 to 5. We'll just put a single line of 1 there. I can change the color of the line if I wanted to. It's black right now, but if I clicked on here, I get all these color choices. And I can also change its angle. You can see down below now as I swing it back and forth, I can go from horizontal to vertical in any angle I want, and we will leave it horizontal for now. So you get some options on lines. Next up, I need that line over here for score. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to duplicate it. Why go through all the trouble? Just duplicate it and drag it down and put it right there next to the score. And now I have my competitor line and my scorer line just like that. Pretty simple and straightforward. Let's go take a look at a preview. and see how it looks. Now the preview is showing me 5 cards worth of data, okay? And so we're going to look at the first card, but I'll show you what happens when I get, I think, to the pairing group that has 2 sets of T's. It fills out the card pretty well. There we go. And so you can't see the line here, but they're definitely here. If I made them 2-point, you'd see it on the preview, but the lines will show up when we print. But if I scroll down, you can see here's another pairing group with just 2 guys, and another pairing group with just, oh, here's our first one. This has both Gene Peters, woman, and Robert Zach. So it has put both Creek men and Creek women on the card. And so this card is much more full. You can see the grid goes down closer to the scoring competitor line, just like we knew we had to do. So the cards will vary because I've asked it to vary the cards depending on who's on the card, whether it's a man or a woman. Okay, so what else can we do here? Well, we pretty much filled up the card. We don't need a lot more of the header and footer information, but we do want to do a few things having to do with color just to show you what's possible. So I'm going to go back here to the font colors, fonts and colors, and I'm going to show you a few tricks that we've learned over the years. You may know some of these already. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click to the left of Tim's name, so I select that entire row, and John's name, and I'm going to pick that entire row. And what I want to do here is I want to bold that text. So I'm going to come up here and click the bold button. Now it's going to bold their information and their T information. But the good news here is also is going to make these dots like 2 or 3 times bigger when they get to the card. Okay, so let's turn those 2 off for now. If I go down below and show you the preview, thank you. Good. Show you the preview. Somebody's setting a lot of projects here right now. Let's see if I can get rid of that. The dots you can see are now extra big size, much easier to see with someone who doesn't necessarily have to put on their reading glasses. The other thing we can look at up top is I want to go ahead and style this best ball and gross lines so that they kind of know that they're totals lines. So I'm going to click on the best ball line here and the best ball gross. But in this particular case, I'm going to give them a background color. Okay. And so we're going to go here to background and we're going to give them a bit of a gray color, let's say something like this. That's pretty dark, but right below here, you can see an opacity line. So I can make this lighter or darker just by moving this line back and forth. So I kind of gave it a gray color, but I want it to be pretty light so they can still write in there with a pencil. So we're going to lighten that up quite a bit there. But now the card shows me that these are total lines instead of complete scoring lines. All right, gives me the ability to do a little bit with that. And for the heck of it, we'll just go ahead and bold the text there as well so it stands out on the card. So now I've made some improvements here. And the other thing that I might consider doing here is I can also highlight and colorize any of these boxes if I want to. So in this particular case, let's say I'm going to go through here and check with these boxes here, and maybe the 8th box, 8th hole, and perhaps the 11th hole here. And let's say that we're going to stick in there a nice bright yellow color. So by highlighting those boxes, I can colorize all those yellow like that. Okay. And what we might be able to do there is we might indicate to the group that the yellow today is cart path only. So I don't necessarily have to take and get out a Sharpie or a highlighter and highlight all these. I can do this in advance because I know these holes are the holes that have been cart path only for a week or so now. And then in order to make it crystal clear to everybody, I also have the ability to go back to headers and footers. I'm going to go over here and add a text field. And my text field is going to say yellow holes equal carts on path. In order to make sure that everybody understands that, we're going to take and make it, the 14 probably is okay. And we're going to bold it. We're going to make some of the text here red. So let's make this text a nice bright red. And then we're going to highlight the whole thing in the background with a bright yellow. It's going to look like that when it goes on the card. We apply the text. And then we take this and maybe drag it right down here to the bottom left so that there's no doubt as to what the yellow means. It's card on path. And once again, we go look at our preview and we'll see that that shows up as well. So it's an opportunity for you to put an awful lot of data on one card to make sure everybody knows what's going on. You could use this instead of cards on path. You could use this texting here and extra lines where you could have put a light blue here and a light green here, or maybe an orange. And then down below said blue equals men's closest to the pin, orange equals women's closest to the pin. It's a way to give some additional information. If you were doing a 666 card or a 99 card, you'd have the opportunity to perhaps highlight just the 9 totals on the right side and make them blue and say blue, blue is, alternate shot, and over on the side, green rolls are best ball or scramble. So you can really impart a lot of information so that when people are trying to score this on the course, they're not confused, they're not putting down the wrong one, they're not playing the wrong game. So let's take a look at what this is going to look like in total here. So I'm going to go ahead and save and print this card. So it's going to save it in my library, and then it's going to go ahead and produce this, and then I'll show you what it looks like in PDF form. Scorecards, of course, as you probably all aware already, take a little bit longer than anything else to produce. They're a complex little deal. Creating the file now. And should be less than a minute to do. Wow. A little slow today. Maybe my internet's, well, probably because I'm talking to you guys. So we're going to download the PDF, and then I'm going to stop the share here and start a new share. And that is what your cards look like. Okay, 2 cards per page, and I have 12 pages of cards. You can see the starting holes changing, dots are changing, number of teams are changing, information is changing on every single card as we go through all the cards. So it gives you the total opportunity to put an awful lot of data on a card if you need it, or if you don't. This gives you total control over the cards and what tee boxes you want to have put on there, where you want the tee boxes to be. Don't forget, I didn't show you earlier, I can also resize that grid. If I had a short card and wanted to make the boxes bigger, if I go back here, let me share the screen again. If I go back to the format tab here, I can click on the box, the grid itself. Sorry, let's go to additional info and tees. And it gives me the opportunity to move this grid around and resize it. Right now, I've pretty much taken up the full space, but if I was starting with a much smaller card that didn't need quite as much information, then I could resize that grid to my heart's content. There are handles here on the grid like this to be able to make it smaller. And all it's going to do is make all the rows smaller for you and let the card fit where we want it to fit. Makes it smaller wide to wide and right to left. So again, total control over the card for the most part. You can add rows, take rows away. You have the computer give you a team row, or you can create your own team row. If there is a team game going on, just a little hint, if there's a team game going on and you're going to have team handicaps, dots for the team, then you want the computer to generate the team row for you, okay? Because then it'll put the dots on the team row. If you want to have a special label for that, instead of just saying team score, you can create you can go here to header footer, You can create a text field. Okay. You can say, do I want best ball gross? Okay, whoops, best ball gross. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to make it black. And then I'm going to take and apply that text change. And I can put this anywhere I want. So if I wanted to put it over the top of this or anywhere else, to say I wanted to put it on top of this thing here, the first thing I would do is stop. I'm going to add a rectangle right here. I'm going to pull this rectangle down, line it right there, have it block that out. Now I'm going to pull the best ball gross down. Oops, let's make this come to the front. There we go. And I'm going to put it right over the top. So now I have blocked out what the computer put there, and I put over the top of it what I wanted to say, just by simply putting a white box on top of the text that the computer put there and putting my own text on top of it. Literally, the Scorecard Composer has almost virtually unlimited ability for you to mess with something one way or the other. You can change, by doing that same process, you can change any of the boxes up top by putting a white box over the top and then changing the text. I can also colorize things up here as well. If I wanted, again, if I go back to fonts and colors, if I wanted to change this row, I could make the background black, and I could make the text white and bold. And next thing I know, I've changed my card to have it stand out a little bit differently there by having my whole numbers be in reverse type on a black background. Lots and lots of possibilities. If you need help with this at any point, you can go to the help button and you can click on and type in the word Scorecard Composer, and you'll get a tutorial that will explain all of the tools to you and what you can do with the tools. Again, in this particular case, you can't break the program. So as long as you have all these tools at your disposal, click on them, try them, play with them. You can style stuff, you can colorize stuff, you can size it, you can place it anywhere on the page you want. The only thing it will work on, you're not going to break the program. The only thing you may end up doing is making a really ugly card. And if you did that, then just throw it away and start over, or throw away any one of the elements. Keep in mind that I can click on anything here in my event, including the grid, and I can delete that item and get rid of it altogether. So anything that I put on here I don't like, get rid of it and bring it back again. If you're kind of frustrated, I can't get it to do what I want, take it away, start over. Not a problem. It works just fine. You have the ability to add things, subtract things, stylize things, and bring all kinds of information to a scorecard that you might need. All right, at this point, we're almost done. Is there any questions? If you want to open up your mic, you can ask it verbally. If you want to take and type it in, that's great. Paul, you can see if you open your chat window, Paul said, when you have an event that requires a different number of scorers each hole, can you specify in the program for it to recognize that for shading the boxes? Or do you have to manually shade each box? For instance, 1 ball on the par 3s, 2 on the 4s, etc. If you want them to know what they're doing, then you would have to shade, you can shade all the 1 ball holes at one time and then shade all the others at one time. So if you had 3 colors, you could do each color just once. The shading is to black out unneeded boxes to help the score. Yes, you can also put black in boxes so that they can't write in those boxes. You have control over all the boxes, and you can make the card look the way you want in order to help them score more easily. Absolutely. Don't forget, in terms of 1 ball on the par 3s, 2 on the 4s, etc. If you're having the computer score the system, then you can set that up and the computer will automatically do that regardless of what score they put on the card. It'll take care of that for you. But yes, you can highlight colors and then even give the people down below a little legend. But it doesn't do that automatically. You have to do that yourself. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the question. Anything else anybody wants to ask at this point? Again, open up your mic and ask verbally, or you can type into the chat window if you have any questions at all. You can see the versatility of the Scorecard Composer. It's pretty cool. Good news is it's also always in your library. So if you make an ugly one, it's there. And if you make a good one, it's there. No, you're very welcome for your help, for the help. We're happy to help. Okay, anything else that came to mind? Our next session is Report Composer. So if you haven't signed up for that, go ahead and do that. It follows similar steps as here, just a bigger screen and a lot more data that can be put on there to make scorecards, scoreboards, T-sheets, any kind of report that you're looking for the most part. Very versatile. And we'll go through a demonstration of Report Composer in the next class. If that'll do it, I'll stay online a little bit more, but you're welcome to leave at this point. And if you have any questions, continue to type them in. I'll be on here for another couple minutes. Thanks again for tuning in and appreciate your time.